Welcome to episode 48 of the Animorphs Read Along broadcast. Today we are talking about book 41, The Familiar. This book gets a really bad rap, and I mean, it's deserved, but I also kind of liked it. Unlike some of the other really bad Animorph books, this at least gives you something to work with. Even if the presentation is way over the top, there's some decent Jake material here, and therefore I don't feel the need to delete this from the series. This book starts out in a strikingly similar manner to Megamorphs number 4, and I think in a lot of ways this is kind of an inverse of Megamorphs number 4. If Megamorphs 4 is kind of looking back to where they've come from, this book is looking forward to where they could potentially go. Now, obviously, this is not a remotely realistic depiction of the future, nothing makes sense. You're jumping from scenario to scenario, it's really hard to keep up. You're in this totally unknown setting, and there's a lot of description, and it's a lot to take in. There were just parts where I was like, what just happened? So who knows what the hell this actually was? I kind of had settled on the idea that this was a dream, and I still think it was a dream, but that weird part with aliens talking, is this supposed to be some sort of abduction scenario? But either way, we do know that none of it was real, and it was kind of this product of Jake's subconscious, and it was really all, him processing those first 2 chapters. At the beginning, the Animorphs are in a really bad fight. It's not one that they're winning. After the battle, everyone's really grouchy and moody. People are lashing out at each other. Tobias is kind of withdrawn, and Jake says, ever since a Yeerk subvisor held and tortured him, Tobias hadn't been the same. Even more time spent alone now than before. Withdrawn. Despondent. Not good. So in book 40, when Marco was saying Tobias has been moody and weird, this is about the subvisor thing. I'm glad they're finally addressing it, because getting tortured isn't exactly something that you get over right away. Basically, in these opening chapters, Jake makes the decision that could have gotten Marco and Rachel killed, and then he walks away from Cassie when she's trying to kind of emotionally decompress. And those are kind of the 2 moments that really shape the rest of the book in terms of this psychedelic anxiety dream that Jake is going to have. I think I had much greater patience for this story when I was a kid, kind of figuring out fairly quickly that this was not the Ellimist or Craig, and this was not a real vision of the future. I was like, okay, this is nice, but I'm ready to get to the end. Having said that, I do think this dream is really interesting, and I'm a sucker for dystopian futures, and I liked seeing where all the Animorphs ended up in this scenario. I thought there was a lot of good stuff here, I just was kind of not into dwelling on it. It was interesting for a while, but this book could have been a few chapters shorter. When Jake runs into Tobias has morphed into Axe permanently and has kind of grown into an adult Andalite, and Jake mistakes him for Elfangor. And they're talking, and he says, I can stop the Yeerks without sacrificing my friends, without botching the war and bumbling into your brand of terrorism and half-freedoms. I can stop them before we sacrifice the very things we're fighting for. Elfangor laughed in my mind. Victory without sacrifice? You know better than that. There's real desperation here. I think Jake is starting to come to the conclusion that he's going to have to cross some of these lines, and he's going to have to make some major sacrifices, and he might have to detach himself from what they're fighting for. Things are going to get ugly, and you can see there's a lot of turmoil going on inside of Jake. He keeps getting closer and closer to the edge, and I think this book was kind of about him taking a few steps back and realigning his priorities. In this dream, he's deciding whether or not to save Cassie or to stop this moonbeam from turning the moon into a Kandrona. Stopping the moonbeam is sort of the greater good, but in this situation, in this dream, he decides to save Cassie instead, and it's kind of his subconscious defiantly saying no, I choose Cassie, I choose love, I choose my friends. And in the wake of making, kind of a harsh call when he did really put Rachel and Marco's lives at risk, maybe he needs to have that moment where he chooses his friends over the greater good. So yeah, if I look at this book as Jake's subconscious kind of dealing with some of the trauma and anxiety, trying to come to terms with the decisions that he's been making, then I like it a lot better. If I think of it as some bizarre, unexplained alien experiment, I get kind of annoyed. This book ends with Jake waking up in his bed. He immediately calls Cassie, and when she picks up, he says, Cassie, I just wanted to ask what I should have asked you yesterday. Are you okay? So yes, I find the whole waking up in an unknown future thing exciting, but I do think this went on for a little bit too long. Obviously, this book kind of ends with a giant question mark and you just going, what did I just read? But I do think this book really gets at some of Jake's deepest fears, and a lot of those fears are very well grounded. Jake is navigating through being in charge of a guerrilla resistance and living in a house with the enemy, and there's just A lot going on here, and I have no problem with those fears being addressed or examined in this format. I just think it could have been done better. So those are all my thoughts about Animorphs number 41, The Familiar. The next book is book number 42, The Journey. If you want to keep up with this read along, subscribe to this channel or follow me on Twitter, and I will see you on Thursday.